Hi, this is episode 8 of Swarzo History, and this one is about the history behind my song Sphacteria, which is about the Battle of Sphacteria, which is like a mini battle within the bigger battle of Pylos during the Peloponnesian War. So, our source for this one is again Thucydides, and this time it's book 4. And this is taking place in the 7th year of the Peloponnesian War. So early, if you consider 7 years not that long, but in the grand scheme of things, it's early in the war. So the Battle of Pylos, that's how this all starts. Basically, the Athenians make an effort to get a foothold in the Peloponnesians' turf, and they do this by taking a place called Pylos. It's on a peninsula, and there's fortifications there that they shore up, and this causes a big panic among the Spartans and their allies, and they basically retreat all of their forces out of whatever they're doing and redirect everything to Pylos to kind of put a halt to whatever is going on there. Right off of the coast of Pylos, where the fortifications are, and where the only real harbor is an island, and that's Sphacteria. It's uninhabited, it's wooded, but it's like, it forms like a roadway. There's an island, the harbor is right behind the island, and the only way to get to the harbor at Pylos is through the little water channel that goes in between the island and the peninsula, both sides. So what the Spartans decide to do is get a force onto that island and block those two passageways to the port at Pylos. And this way they can cut off any attempt by the Athenians to help their own people at Pylos. So the Spartans choose an occupying force for Sphacteria by drawing lots, and that force kind of works in shifts. So there'll be a force that gets sent to the island, and then when their time is up, they'll get relieved by a different one. The last one that gets sent there is about 420 or 440 hoplites, because Thucydides says both of those numbers at different times, accompanied by a bunch of helots to wait on them, and those forces are commanded by a guy called Epitatus. So what happens is, while those guys are on the island, the Spartans' naval force tries to make a landing at Pylos, and the Athenian resistance on the beaches is too much and they just can't do it. And while this is going on, a fresh Athenian naval force shows up on the scene and obliterates the Spartan navy, basically, and chases it away. And there's actually a dramatic moment where the Spartan navy's retreating. The Spartan land forces see what's going on and realize that if their navy is gone, then the guys who are left on the island of Sphacteria are cut off and surrounded by Athenian ships with no hope. So these Spartan soldiers in full armor, like, rushing into the water to try and drag back the empty ships that the Athenians are towing away, to try and salvage some of this stuff. They get some of the ships back, but basically the fighting breaks off, and the Spartans on Sphacteria are stuck. There's a moment where both sides negotiate a little bit, and there's an armistice set up that allows the Spartans to send food and wine and stuff to the guys on the island, in return for the Spartans giving the Athenians back a bunch of ships that they captured earlier on. And they send a delegation to Athens to kind of discuss what is going to happen next. And Cleon is rising to power in Athens at this point, and he's urging that the Athenians don't accept any terms from the Spartans unless the Spartans agree to all of these huge concessions, because he realizes that the Spartans are the ones in a precarious situation right now, and the Athenians have the bargaining power. The Spartan delegates don't feel comfortable agreeing to this stuff, obviously, so they leave. That ends the armistice, and the Athenians set up a naval patrol route around the island, and they basically keep these guys cut off and surrounded. So throughout this, the Spartans don't really have a local source of food, and they rely on volunteers who are willing to risk running the Athenian blockade during storms or at nighttime. And this actually works for a little while, and the Athenians are getting discouraged, and the Athenian people are getting discouraged that it's taking so long to dislodge these guys from the island. And essentially what Cleon does is claim that all these reports coming from the battlefield are fake news, and says this isn't really happening, there's no way. It's just that the generals on the ground, like Nicias, are incompetent and they're not manly enough. And he gets chosen to go as an inspector to go verify the information since he's disputing it. And he knows that that's kind of a lose-lose situation for him, so he spins it to say, we should just send another military force out there. His political rival and the general, Nicias, calls him out for this and says, look, if you think you can do a better job, you can do it. And Cleon's like, yeah, I could do a better job. And Nicias is like, okay, well then I'm stepping down. And you're really gonna do it. And Cleon starts to back off, saying, well, no, I'm not a general. You're the general. You should be doing a better job. The people of Athens see this as, yeah, he's stepping down. Cleon said he could do it, so Cleon's gonna do it. So he gets kind of pressured into being a general, and he makes a promise of victory within 20 days. And that seems crazy to everybody, but the Athenian council is like, well, this is a win-win for us, because either he goes off and dies and we don't have to deal with him anymore, or he goes and he wins, and that's a victory for Athens. So Cleon assembles a force that is mostly Athenian allies and not Athenian citizens, because he makes that a point that he's not going to use Athenian citizens. And the force is primarily made up of peltists and archers, so people who sling things and throw things and shoot things. He meets up with Demosthenes, who is leading forces at Pylos, and they send an offer of surrender to the Spartans, and the Spartans refuse. So they land a force of about 800 guys on the island just before dawn a day later and take the advanced guard posts by surprise and wipe them out. And then at dawn, they land the rest of the Athenian forces, which Thucydides says is like 800 peltists and another 800 archers. And that's in addition to the troops that were already involved in the Battle of Pylos. So the Athenians divide their forces into units of about 200 guys, and they set them to basically surround the Spartans by taking all the high ground on the island. And this means that wherever the Spartans go to confront an enemy force, there's another enemy force either on their flanks or behind them, and they get hit that way. And because most of these Athenian forces are using projectiles, it's very frustrating because the Spartans can't close the distance on them, because as they're trying to close distance on them, they're getting hit with things. And when they start to get close, the peltists and archers are lightly armed and faster, so they just run away until the Spartans get tired in their heavy armor and equipment and have to stop, and then the lightly armored people just turn around and keep doing what they were doing. And this is demoralizing and disastrous for the Spartans on the ground. After a while, this wears the Spartans down. They start getting tired. The peltists and archers are getting amped up because they realize the Spartans are getting tired and they're winning. So they start screaming and taunting. There's a lot of dust from fires that had gone on the night before, and the Spartans are confused. They can't hear anything because of all the screaming. and they can't see anything because of all the dust. Their armor is making them very tired, and they're unable to fight back really at all. The Spartans end up retreating, a fighting retreat, back to the tip of the island where there's a fort. And the Messenian commander, one of the Athenian allies, gets permission to take a little force to go flank around the fort on the cliffs of the island, which are supposedly inaccessible, so the Spartans aren't guarding it. And, you know, lo and behold, the force does get around the fort and into the Spartan camp. And Cleon and Demosthenes want to take the Spartans prisoner for propaganda purposes. They don't want to wipe them out if they can help it. So they halt their attack and send people in to negotiate. The Spartans send a herald to the mainland to talk to their people, and they're told basically, you gotta make a choice, just don't do anything dishonorable. And in the end, the Spartan force their surrenders to the Athenians. And Thucydides says it's 292 hoplites that surrender, the rest having been killed. And there's really no Athenian casualties to report on because the way the fight went, they didn't really suffer any. And one of the unfortunate facts of the matter is Cleon ended up pulling it off and winning his victory within 20 days. But this battle and the Spartan surrender there shocked everybody, because the Spartans had a reputation for never surrendering their weapons, fighting to the death rather than give up, and this turned out to not be true. And their enemies mocked them pretty mercilessly for it. It really emboldened Athens throughout the course of the war, because they just won something really cool. And now they feel pretty good about themselves. They're able to set up a garrison at Pylos now. This garrison at Pylos becomes like a base for guerrilla warfare against Sparta and its allies, which causes a lot of desertion and poor morale in their camp. And then at Athens, everybody's feeling good about themselves, and Cleon comes back as a hero. The Spartan prisoners at Athens get held as hostages, basically. So as hostages, they're held under the threat of death if any Spartan invasion happens. So Spartan invasion doesn't really happen. The Athenians get to kind of go about their days for a little while without worrying about invasions. Being put in that situation where you're part of a group with this extreme reputation and pride about never surrendering, and you're put in this impossible position where you're offered a chance to surrender, and if you don't, you're just gonna die. And what do? Do you accept that offer of surrender, or do you die? Waste your life and the lives of everyone else for reputation. So that's the gist of what happened at Sphacteria. I think the song is pretty self-explanatory. If you didn't know already, I've got a website now, Swarzo.com, where you can watch all of these Swarzo history episodes just like on YouTube, because I embed them on there. It's also got all of my music for sale, and if you don't want to buy it, you can just go listen to it on any other streaming site ever. And I have new music coming very soon, so keep an eye out for updates about that. On that note, the next episode of Swarzo History is going to be about the song Odyssey, which is the first song I ever wrote and released. So be ready for that one.